Hello, everybody. Good evening. I am Erica Rand-Silverman, and I am a literary agent at Stimula Literary Studio. And you are joining us this evening for Beyond the Page with Middle Grade. It has been about 2 months since we've had a Stimula live event, so I am extra pumped up and extra excited to spend the evening with you all. And it is my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Rose Brock, who is going to be moderating our conversation tonight. And she will be able to tell you more about what you can expect. And if you don't already know, which you totally should, and you will now, Dr. Rose Brock is a professor at Sam Houston State University of Children's and YA Lit. She is an award-winning educator and librarian. She is the co-founder of the absolutely incredible North Texas Teen Book Festival. She's an author in her own right. And she said yes when I asked her to join us this evening. So now that I've embarrassed her a ton, I'm going to bring in Rose. Rose, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for moderating the conversation.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
I am going to let you introduce the amazing authors that we have from Stimula here with us this evening, and I will be watching on the back end. And thank you again. Take it away.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm Rose, and I am really honored to get to facilitate this talk tonight. We are focusing on moving beyond the page, which I think is so exciting as an educator myself. I don't know about you, but for those of you watching, I always love to find out more about inspiration when we're talking to authors. And I think especially when we're talking about the connections we make with kids, that's really, really important. And I certainly know that it makes a real difference to readers. So before we jump in and start having the talk, I will obviously want to bring on everyone that's going to be joining me. So it's my pleasure to introduce and to have join me James Byrd. Hi, James. Welcome. Oh, look, you're all just coming up there. I love it. So we've got James with us. We've got Donna, Barb, Higuera. We have Thanhha Lai and James Ponti. And all of us are thrilled to be here. Or maybe I shouldn't speak for y'all, but I bet you are thrilled.
Absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, for sure. So again, I'm really delighted to get to talk about books. This idea of extending beyond that. We're going to focus on story, but we're also going to move beyond that, talk about what has inspired all of y'all, and then just all kinds of other stuff. So, but before we get into that, I thought that what I would do is ask each of you to introduce yourself again. And rather than me reading a big long bio about you, just if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about who you are and your work. And then we'll get into some conversation. So I'm going to start with James as our newbie to the book world. James, you've had an interesting, kind of quite extraordinary life. So I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
James, me, right?
Yes. Oh, sorry. James B.
I've not had an interesting life.
I'm going to do this alphabetical.
I've not had an interesting life, so it's all you. Yeah.
I'm James Byrd. I am a debut author. Well, my book came out last year, called The Brave, and I'm very excited. I know all your guys' names from 2 or 3 years now on Facebook, so it's good to put faces there. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Donna, do you mind telling us a little bit, introduce yourself and tell us about your work, please.
I'm Donna Higuera, and I will cue James. Oh, that way, James. I wrote Lupe Wong Won't Dance, and it was my debut August of last year. And I live in the Pacific Northwest with my husband and kids. He's also a middle grade writer, my husband, Mark Maciejewski, who photobombed and jumped into our conversation because he needed to meet James Ponte. And then this is my picture book with Abrams, El Cucuy is Scared Too, which releases in July. And then one last middle grade. This is all I have, but this cover is beautiful. I hope you can see it. It's called The Last Quintista. And that is another middle grade with Levine Guerrero, and it releases August of 2021. So I'm having a very busy year.
That's awesome. Thank you, Donna, and welcome. All right, Thanhha.
Hi, good evening. What I do basically is I pronounce my name for people. That is my job. So it's Thanhha and then Lai. So I've written 2 middle grade novels, and then for some reason I thought it would be fine to jump into the YA area. And my most recent novel is Butterfly Yellow, and I'm finding that I really like middle grade. So I will be coming back. It's a different world in the YA world. They do different things. I haven't figured them out. So I'm delighted to accidentally have happen on the middle grade world. I just had a character who's 10 based on myself. I didn't even know there was a thing called middle grade because I don't pay attention. And so, Rosemary actually was the one who told me, what you have here is a middle grade novel. And I was like, okay, it doesn't matter what it is, just publish it. So that's how I came in.
I love that. Well, we might have time. We'll see. We might have time to kind of pick apart the YA versus, we'll, make it like the Sharks and the Jets, very YA versus middle grade, but maybe not. We'll see. All right, Mr. Ponte, tell us about yourself.
Hi, so my name's James Ponti, and I started in TV. I was a poor reader growing up, and I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I couldn't imagine I could write books because I could barely read books in my mind. So I wrote television. I worked for Disney Channel and Nickelodeon and PBS, and then along the way got into doing books. And I have 3 book series in middle grade. First one is the Dead City series. There are 3 books in that. The next one was the Frame series. 3 books in that. Hope there's going to be one more if my editor's watching. And then the current series that I'm doing though is City Spies. And the first one came out a year ago. The second one came out a few months ago. And then the third one is currently what I'm supposed to be doing instead of talking to you guys. So very excited to be here and a little upset to realize that both Donna and James are debut writers, because you read their work and it doesn't feel debut. It feels kind of upsetting to me that they started where they did, where I kind of would have liked it more if maybe they had struggled a bit and it was kind of like, oh, you'll get better, but they're like really accomplished. So that's, and so, yeah, anyway, and it's going to be a confusing night because we have 2 Jameses here. There's a Rose here, and then the head of the Stamola studio is also Rosemary. So you'll hear Rosemary and you'll think we're talking about Rose. You'll hear James. It's going to all work out. And that's the beauty of the names at the bottom. And, we're all friends. So that's good.
Thank you so much. And you're right. And actually to add a layer of confusion is I'm actually a Rose Marie that goes by either Rose, Rosie, or Ro, but I won't be Ro tonight. I'll stick with Rose, and that'll make it, because otherwise it'll just be clear as mud. So
there we go.
Okay. So again, we're talking about moving beyond the page tonight.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt Rose for a second.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think it's very exciting for me because I know the last person that Rose interviewed online was for TLA, I believe it was Matthew McConaughey. So she's moving up. She's moving up. She's building from the lesser known authors like Matthew McConaughey to the more established authors like the 4 of us. And I think congratulations to you for making that progression in your career.
I appreciate that. I really do. He was all right. He was all right. But y'all are fantastic.
He was all right. We know. Yeah. Okay.
Well done. Okay. So let's start talking about middle grade. So I know in looking, there are a lot of, educators, librarians, and teachers. And I know from my own experience and probably from the experience of Erica and that introduced me with Stamola, and just anyone gathered that's an educator. One of the things that, as educators that we try to do when we share books, on the one hand, like as a teacher, probably one of the things that's most important is really connecting young people to stories. And I know when doing that, sometimes we do that simply by just sharing a book that really resonates with us, that we really love. But I also know there's also when you have the opportunity to layer that, where you can talk to kids not just about that story, but really make authors feel like real people to them. I think there's just something really rich and wonderful about that. And so, we want to know, today is our opportunity to find out more about each of you. So we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about some of those things, because we know we want to bring, your story's alive. We want to bring you alive. We want to know how you were inspired, all those kinds of things. So let's start talking about middle grade. And, you know, all your books, in thinking about your work, they're all different, are obviously in regard to plot and maybe even some genre, but they also have some common elements and hallmarks, in my mind anyway, of really fantastic middle grade books. And you know, what that makes me think of is, like, you know, did you each intend when you started writing? Thanhha kind of addressed it. She said, maybe not so much. She was like, what is this? I don't care. Just publish it, which I love that, right? Let's be pragmatic and realistic. But did you go in thinking of a certain audience when you were writing? Did that, you know, as you were creating your stories, what role does that have? So I don't think we have to go in order. We'll mix it up. I'm going to ask Thanhha to answer first, if she doesn't mind, since she just wanted it sold. So do you mind speaking to that? And then we'll just kind of take turns.
I never think about my audience because I guess, because I disappear inside a character. So if I'm thinking about an audience, then it just messes me up. I want to disappear inside a character so much that I live and breathe this character. And once you do that, it doesn't really matter to me which age group you're in. It's publishing that decides which box to put me in, right? My last character was 18, so she's YA. She could not stay in middle grade. My first novel had a 10-year-old, so she's middle grade. So somebody else is making all these decisions, and good for them. My decisions all have to do with writing. You know, how do you get inside the mind of a 10-year-old in a way that's authentic to the language she's using, to the observations that she would have, to the sight, smell, touch, everything that a 10-year-old would be going through. In my case, it was during a war. So by the time you get done focusing so intensely on that, you're just exhausted. I don't have time. I'm not even thinking about the audience. I'm like, well, and what happens is I get emails, and it seems to me that I cannot even predict who's going to be emailing me, because it just comes from all over, all age groups. So I have no idea actually why we have these categories called middle grade. Why, I have no idea. So, but I'm a part of it. So
thank you so much. James, Byrd.
Yeah, I never knew what middle grade or YA or the difference between adult was. And my wife's an author, and she's a YA author, so that's the only way I had like some reference to it. But I didn't know when I sent the book, and I didn't know the difference. I didn't know what I wrote, what, you know, genre it would be or level. But I come from the film world too, so like I come from making movies, and I didn't base, like when I write, I didn't base the audience to be like, I didn't write it for children, but everything I do, including books, but for movies mostly, is in the hopes that actual kids watch it. And because growing up, movies saved my life, books saved my life. Like, I didn't have a dad, I never met my dad, so my father figure or male role models were always geared towards people on the page or people on the screen. So I wanted, no matter what I did or what age range or anything, I wanted kids to kind of have what I had, where it's like, if they didn't have someone at home or have someone to look up to, you can pick a character or an actor and kind of have that person mold you a little bit.
Donna.
Well, for me, I don't think that I think I write more character driven. I think that I might have the idea for a plot point, but I can't go any further until I figure out who the character is. For instance, with Lupe, it was over a dinner conversation with my daughters where one of them had come home and was upset she was going to have to square dance in PE. And if anybody's read the book, it's not about square dancing. It's about having agency at a certain age. And I think in middle school was where I felt the most awkward. And I think a lot of kids do, and also feel like they can't change the world around them. And as a mother, I was sitting here and had all these conflicted emotions about my kids going, okay, why do they have to square dance? Why can't they wear the same length of shorts that boys can? And so this character, Lupe Wong, appeared, and she was way more vocal than myself or my daughters had been. And so that's normally how a character arrives. And, you know, for instance, Lupe, what isn't the most likable character at the beginning, but she grows, and hopefully all of our characters grow. But I think as I'm writing, it always starts out with a character, and almost always the character is a little bit awkward or feels powerless. I have written YA before, and I wasn't having as much fun. Like Thanhha, I think I did it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going back to middle grade. I think it's just where I'm the most comfortable. The next book I wrote, the character, I think just the subject matter is older, so it feels like I'm the edge of upper middle grade and YA, but YA stresses me out, so I think I'm just gonna stick with middle grade. It just feels the most natural to me, even though it's probably where I feel the most angst and awkward and powerless.
I'm going to be the dissenting voice, I guess. I think about my audience a ton, our audience, because it's really that's the beauty of it is, you know, our books aren't soloed. Our you know, whoever's reading James's book is hopefully reading my book, and we're part of that. But I came at it from a different direction, and maybe that's why. So the real formative writing time for me, when I was in college, every summer I worked at Disney World, and I was Davy Crockett, and I stood in front of a canoe, and I told really bad jokes for half an hour. And that was as they paddled around in 90-degree weather. And you learn quickly that different jokes work for different people. And by the age, by the mood, by the vibe of which you're in, and you can't have a crew mutiny because I need all 16 of them to paddle this 1,600-pound fiberglass canoe around, you know, Walt Disney World. And so there were a couple test jokes at the beginning to help get the tenor of the audience, and then you would, because the beauty was it was so hot, our bosses never wrote on the ride, so we told whatever jokes we wanted to tell. You would tailor the jokes for the audience, and that really was a nice counterpoint to what I was learning in school and college and more formal writing about, you know, and my first jobs were in kids television, and because of that, I think I was ingrained to write to a certain age. So I'm always thinking about the audience. I'm never talking down to them. I'm never taking shortcuts on their behalf, but I am trying to remember who they are. But just like others, Ro at the agency at Samola, I sent in my very first book, which was Dead City, which I thought was a brilliant young adult novel, and she informed me that it was maybe going to be a decent middle grade novel. And so I had to rewrite the first 50 pages and change all the ages, and then it worked. And then when it worked, I realized, oh, okay, whether I want to or not, whether that's my intention or not, this is where my writing finds it, you know, where it meets. And middle grade is my sweet spot, and where I should spend most, if not all, of my time. And so I have a young adult novel that's coming up. I'm a little leery about it. You know, I'm actually finding teenagers to read this to make sure, because I think it's probably a little tamer than they're used to. But yeah, middle grade is just, I love that audience. So I think about them not in an obsessive way, but I think about them in an admirable way, because I love the way the middle grade mind works, and the view they have of the world is such a great opportunity to write for. I think there's so much more open-minded than even the young adult reader. I think middle grade readers are ready to, you know, hear you out, and it's wonderful to write for them.
Yeah, I agree. So my background as an educator, I was a middle school teacher for many years, and then a middle school librarian. And I think often people get confused. They hear middle grade, you know, extends down to elementary. So your books are all found in good elementary classrooms and libraries, and also into middle school, which is awesome because it has a place. And that is such a special age. So whether you intended to write for those kids or not, I think it's so important that they have books that speak to them and that really address kind of those shared universal experiences, right? At this age, I mean, if you think about it, no matter what your stories are, often we're thinking about, you know, family, and we're thinking about home, and we're thinking about who we are, all those things. I think in the best of middle grade that we find those elements. in the books. Okay, so we're going to move on, and I'm not going to call on you anymore because I really would love for you, just whoever feels like talking, to talk. I don't want it to feel like school where you're like, oh, pick me or don't pick me. You all get to talk. And if there's something you don't want to answer, you don't have to, because we get to make the rules. So how about that? Does that work for everybody? I like making rules or not following rules. So a question that's often asked, I think, both by educators and also by, aspiring writers or people who work with young people that are going to write, because that's also a piece of this, right? With books and everything you do, we're really wanting kids to also find their own voice, right? So that they tell their story. That's so, so important. I'd love to know about all kinds of things. I'd love to know about your process. I'd love to know, even though, some people think that's a boring question, but I think often people are kind of fascinated about, like, how do you get inspired for your different books? What made you think, like, this is the story I wanted to tell? So if you would each kind of jump in when you feel like it and tell us a little more about that.
So I do free association writing, and that's the way I have to write, and that's with no notes and no outline. I don't know anything that's going to happen. I don't know how the story ends, and I only write for about 1 week a month. Because I have a 2-year-old baby now, and my wife writes like nonstop, and so I give it. So we were supposed to take shifts, but I have so much fun with the baby that I gave her my shift for the last 2 years now. So I haven't taken one writing shift of mine yet. But the baby visits the grandma in Connecticut for about a week, a month. So that's when I write. So everything I try to write a whole book each week.
Wow.
Now I hate them more. It takes me a lot longer. I was disappearing to reach to grab some of the tools that I use. As far as process goes, I'm not a good planner. I don't outline a ton, but I outline parts. I write mysteries or spy novels that have mysteries in them. And I find that you have to have, I need to have that part figured out. I don't have to have all the other parts. I like to explore and find, but I need to know the solution of the mystery, so I at least can make sure that it's going to be good and it's going to work out. And then I write notes to myself. So I have these little boards. And I'll write, like, on this one, it's all the characters' problem. Each character, I wanted to make sure each character in this book had a really well-defined plot line. So these are the 5 main characters and what the problem is, so that as I'm writing, I'm thinking, okay, and while I don't outline during, when I get to the end, I outline a ton, which seems to be counterintuitive. So I make like this. So this is the book I'm writing right now. And it's every chapter in the book, and the colors represent the characters who are featured in that chapter. And because I'm visual learner and visual in a lot of ways, I like to be able to just look at this across the room, almost more concerned about the coloring than anything else, and realize, well, gee, there's not a lot of yellow, so I'm really worried about the character, So that's a bit how I do it.
I start off very much like James Ponte. I have I have my little character cards and chapters, everything. And then the characters actually start arriving to the story. And then once they start arriving, I'll get partway through and then it goes off the rails and I have no control. And so everything I plotted out very carefully, it just goes out the window and the story just goes wherever it's going to go. And then as I'm going through revision, again, it changes a lot. I recently went back when I finished the last Quintista and looked at my original notes. I'm like, these characters aren't even in the novel. And like, there are things that I totally forgot about that I was sure it was gonna end a certain way, and it didn't even make it in the book. So it's hard. I think I'm a plotter, but I'm not. I end up getting partway through, and the characters kind of, my imagination and the characters and where they go, that's what writes the novel.
All right, so I finally figured out I'm what's a voice-driven writer. So I don't really care about plot, and the characters are there. I mean, it's not that hard to come up with a character. They're just all over the place, right? We live, we meet people, they breathe, and we just suck them in. As far as plot, you have beginning, middle, and end. I usually have something like that. But I really can't really sink into a novel until I know how the words are going to land on a page, right? The voice. And that just takes me decades because I'm the slowest human on the earth. So I used to stare at a computer for hours on end, but then that just gives me migraines now. So my new thing is to walk through the woods and talk into this app called Otter. So I'm just talking until something happens. So I guess I used to just type into a file called random notes, and there would be thousands of pages of just thoughts. And now I just do it orally with an app. And but again, it all comes back to voice. Once I know how the words are gonna land, then I start. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a very long-winded way to get a novel done.
I totally agree with that, though, that for me, the single most important thing and the single most time-consuming and difficult thing is finding the voice of the novel. You know, plot can work out, and that's where I'll do the most, throwing out 50 pages and starting over again. And the Frame series, I had 3 different narrators, third person, first. I mean, I went through everything until finally, because I do a lot of reading out loud. You know, that's how I test it. And when I heard it, it's like, okay, that's right. And now I have the right voice, and now I can go forward. So I can totally see her pain and feel her pain with that.
So Thanhha, I have a question for you then. So in thinking about, like, first of all, that sounds exhausting. But in the end, I mean, like, you've written some really brilliant, beautiful books. When you're writing about your, like, kind of your own shared experiences, even though it's still fiction, you're taking your own life. Do you find it more challenging to find the voice, or is it just that much easier because it's like, it's part of who you are?
Well, you know, I'm in my mid 50s. So when I started writing Inside Out and Back Again, I was in my late 30s, early 40s. That thing took me 15 years. Okay. I know it reads like I wrote it in a day because it's like lots of blank page, lots of blank space. And when I tell students, they're like, but the voice was just never right. And the reason why that is in prose poems rather than just regular prose is because I tried writing in prose for like 15 years and it didn't work. It's because if Ha, the character, she's in Vietnam and she's thinking in Vietnamese and she really doesn't even learn English, even towards the end of the book. It's only been 1 year in the United States. So her brain is a Vietnamese brain, and I could not convey that in sentences. But of course, I didn't know there was this thing called prose poems because apparently I just live in a cave and I don't know anything. And I thought I invented it, right? So one day I'm standing on a playground in New York City and all these images just popped up. And it was in quick, sharp spurts, and it was just visual. And so you didn't have these long, windy sentences. You just have like quick. And I was like, that's the voice. And once I got that, instead of 15 years, it took like 2 months to get a first draft down. So sometimes you just wait. And then it pops. And then I thought I invented this thing. So I would go on these school visits and I was like, wow, this thing is called Prose Poems. And and then a teacher said, actually, that's been around for a really long time. So I've invented nothing. I've wasted 15 years when I'm sure there was a book out there that I could have just, could have inspired me. But that's just how it goes. Right now, I'm writing Inside Out. And you would think in my head, it's so simple. The voice is there. It's set. Oh, no. I hope it's not another 15 years because I'm so tired. But it doesn't work. I wish I were a faster writer.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I'm glad I wasn't the one that had to tell you that verse novels have been around a little bit, but there are many, and some of them are done really beautifully and some not so much. So yours absolutely falls in the beautiful category. So, you took some time to get it done, but you got there. What about the rest of y'all? What role of yourself goes into what you're doing and what you're writing?
I think for me, a lot. I think that although I'm not, because people go, oh, are you your characters? And no, but I think a lot of times my characters will say the things that I wish I would have said in a certain situation. And I think that it gives you that inner voice sometimes, for me at least, in my head. Like when James Ponti was talking about how he writes for students, I would I would nosedive if I tried to write for kids, because I don't think it would come off authentically for me, for the way I write. And so in my mind, I think I go back to that part where I was the age of that character, and it just comes out like the things I wish I would have said. And even in the novel, the next novel I have coming out, but the characters aren't me, but they're also, I feel like if I see this character who's having trouble in my book, I want to be an advocate for them. So I try not to insert my own voice, but at least have them say something that, that can advocate for themselves, because that's what makes books more interesting when there's stuff going on. But it's not me, and because I wouldn't be nearly as interesting as my characters are.
Donna just used the key word for middle grade to me. Authentic. I think that more than anything, people talk about plot and character, and all that's true and all that's real, but really kids see authenticity or not. They see real, and more than any other group, they'll call you out on it if it isn't. And I think, one of the things that I love about this group today and is like, so James's book, The Brave, and my book, City Spies, are very different, but other than having the same first name, James and I also have the fact that I've never met my father either. And that is the single driving influence of the dynamics of kids and adults in my books. So there's this common thread that is personal of us, whether we don't write our person, and I don't want to speak for him, but from what I know from his book and the relationship that the character has with his father in the book, and it's the same kind of stuff. So that's a similarity. Donna, I said it wrong. Thanhha, hopefully I got it right. She came from Vietnam to Alabama, and I came from from Italy to Florida. So there's a similarity. And Donna, we were joking earlier, grew up in the desert near where my wife grew up in the desert in California. And what I love about all of that is, unlike a lot of careers where it matters who you are, or where you were born, or how much money your family have, or what connections, the beauty of what we do is that, no, all that matters is that you tell the truth. And you can be from anywhere. And in fact, if you are from different places, you tell more universal truths. And that's what excites me about these books. I mean, that's what's great about, I keep holding them up. I don't mean to be the prop master, but it's like, I am terrible at poetry. But to refresh myself, before we got on about an hour ago, I started reading this. I had to stop because it wasn't the poetry that I normally get stuck on. It was the voice she's talking about, the voice of a girl who thinks the Vietnamese and is learning, and it's just mesmerizing. And I'm going to talk too much, and I don't mean to do that. But when I read in The Brave, and it does, it's like, this is his first book, and what a great opening! What a great way to catch you in with this kid who's struggling. He's counting all the words, and he's fighting against that. And like, I didn't have that, but I had things that I struggle with mentally, with counting in lines and stuff that I connect, and I know it's real. And I don't know if James has a personal knowledge of that, but I know it's real. And then Donna has maybe the greatest opening line of a book ever. So I'm just going to steal it right here and read it out loud. My gym shorts burrow into my butt cheek like a frightened groundhog. Well, you may not be intentionally writing for middle graders, but you are writing for middle graders, because you're speaking authentically to the world they have. And all of us growing up, except maybe James, because he could be 24 for all I know. The books didn't do that. I don't think the books that I came across as a kid were authentic. It was Johnny Tremaine, and it's like it's a nice adventure, but I have no connection to this. So I will stop talking so much. But I love that part, and authentic is the key word.
James, Byrd, you want to add anything to that?
I mean, how do you?
Fair enough. Okay, so we're going to say authentic, no BS. This is a family channel, so I won't say bullshit. Oh wait, I said it anyway. Sorry about that. That's one good way not to be invited back. Sorry, Stamola.
Stamola's an Italian family, so we're okay.
Okay, good. And probably there's not a lot of kids watching, but let's talk more about kids for a moment, and educators, the people that serve and work with children. I'm curious. I know, like, you have a variety of experience. Some of you, again, like James, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, he had this brilliant book that came out in the fall. And while it's gotten tons of praise and lots of, shiny things that people are loving and so forth, you really haven't had a chance probably to get out and spend time and do the real work of doing much in the way of school visits. But those kids will be honest with you. As James said, they will tell you the truth. Just like Thanhha said, like they are going to let you know if you invented something or not, whether it's the teacher or the kids. Tell me about like your best school, for those of you that have done school visits, tell me about your best school visit. What makes that special? What should teachers know about that? And yeah, let's just talk about schools for a moment. So James, Ponte, I know that you've done a lot of school visits. I'll let you answer and then we'll jump in elsewhere. What?
I was talking so much. I don't want to talk too much.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'll tell a quick story. So I was in Branson, Missouri with Framed. And the idea of Framed is the characters use a thing called TOAST. And TOAST stands for the theory of all small things. And these characters look for little details. And they call it toasting. And everywhere I go, kids ask me, can you toast me? Can you toast me, right? Can you look at me and tell me something about myself that isn't apparent? And so I was in a large gym. 5th graders came in, 6th graders came in, 4th graders, like all at one time. And so I'm signing books for this girl, and she has 3 books. I said, oh, that's so nice that you have all the books. She goes, I have all 6 of your books. I'm like, what? She goes, I have all 6 books, but my brother wants to come in the line. He's in the next class. He has the other 3, so he can come in line and meet you. I go, okay. And then they go, oh, okay. So what's your brother's birthday? And she told me his birthday, and I wrote it on my hand in Sharpie and then forgot about it. And then I'm doing the next grade, and it comes time at the end of answering questions. And I said, one more question. Couldn't be said it better. One more question. And this kid raises his hand. And I said, yes. He goes, can you really do toast? And I thought, oh, wait, I was going to play a joke on this kid in line. But now I have the perfect setup. So I said, okay. And I had to figure out, how do I pick him out of a crowd of 200 kids? I said, who has a copy of Dead City? Because I knew that. And this kids raised their hand, and I saw one boy with all 3 books. And I said, okay, you in the back. And I said, get to the middle. And so he's like 20 yards from me. I said, get to the middle. I'm going to stand there, and I'm going to toast you. So he stood there, and I just stared at him. And people are wondering, what's he going to do? And I just said, is your birthday April 27th? And this boy went, oh my God, and screamed at the top of his lungs. And 200 kids screamed like they couldn't believe it. And then I said, that's how good I am. And I walked off the stage. And I came back and tell them, because I didn't want their parents to tell them they were lying. But it was for a second that they believed that I could do that. Was everything that I needed to know about writing for them.
That's lovely. Any other amazing school experiences or visits?
I've had a couple. I did one where I worked with the Young Inklings. I don't know if everyone's heard of them, but they're a group of young writers, and I did a presentation with them. And the best part was at the end when they got to read me some of their work. And I think that, I think kids who are writers, if you can show them parts of their work that you're excited about, they don't need to hear, oh, this is good or whatever. If you can say, oh, this character, whatever, and start asking them questions, and watching young writers, much like we are as writers, like just, you can see the ideas exploding in their head and they're writing things down. That's fun. And, knowing that, they're going to take this and run and write a story. And then one school visit I did was with, it was an ESL class in New York. And they had asked me that my Spanish is not great. I speak like a young child, because that's kind of when I stopped speaking. Growing up in Central California, it was one of those things where there was more of you're supposed to assimilate. They didn't want, my parents were like, don't speak Spanish in public. And so my Spanish isn't great. So I did this visit, and the kids they said, well, we're going to have an interpreter there to help you. And I got on, half the kids had their cameras off. They were silent. And a lot of them were from the Dominican Republic, which Spanish is Spanish, and my Spanish isn't great. And there was just crickets chirping. And so finally I just said to the interpreter, I said, you know what? let me try. And so I think that because they saw my vulnerability and that I was trying to speak Spanish, and some of them would go, oh, you meant to say this, and would tell me the right word. And then all of a sudden the cameras started popping on. And I think that when they know that we as writers, when we can show them our vulnerabilities and the things that we worry about, then suddenly the things that they have fear of, like they wanted to talk, they were just nervous. And then when they saw that I was vulnerable, all of a sudden the conversation exploded, and all of a sudden they all had stories to tell. And so I think that was probably my favorite visit so far.
I love that.
I've had some school visits.
Yeah, I thought about that. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have assumed that you had. And I was just thinking about the timeline, but yeah, it totally makes sense. And certainly Zoom, right? You probably have lots of screens.
I was gonna say most of them have been. I mean, all of them have been Zoom, but I've had a lot of book club, like book group Zooms.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of like school, and a lot of like Native American community group Zooms. So that's been really cool to like travel across America from like reservations and see how kids are there. It's a lot of fun. I actually got instead of Zooms and a book in schools, I get a lot of messages from kids on like Instagram and Facebook. And today I got a message, and I was like, oh, that's so crazy that I got it today, right before this. A mother in Michigan, and she was like, I don't approve of your philosophy, but my son has been bullied relentlessly for the last year, and he read your book, and he got suspended because he punched the bully. And she's like, I just wanted to let you know that thank you for writing the book, because he doesn't get bullied anymore. And I was like, oh my God, like a message from a stranger like that is like, I hope I get to go to school visit like auditoriums one day to like, I think that's the way that we could stop bullying, authors telling their story and telling, different perspectives on how to deal with bullies and how to deal with situations that we all went through when we were in middle school.
Absolutely. It's a tough time. Thanhha, was there anything you wanted to add?
Well, for me, the essential glue in any school visit, whether it's on Zoom or in person, are the teachers and librarians. If they are not excited, then the whole thing is just going to fall apart. And I can sense it within 3 minutes, what kind of a visit I'm going to have. Once I was in North Carolina and I walked in and the librarian looked at me and she goes, and who are you? So then that was just a very long 3 hours, very, very long. But I went to another place in, where was it? Somewhere in the Midwest. For some reason, the Midwest really read my books. I don't know why. You would think it would be California where all the Asians are. I've never been invited to California. I think the story is just too familiar. I have not been able to figure this out. But out in the Midwest, they ate all the food that was in the book. They tried to find, like in Listen Slowly, I talked a lot about yokula, which is the tiger balm. So everyone knew what that was. They were smelling it. So that was fun, just the preparation. So I depend a lot on English teachers to make the visit work. So I always ask for prepared questions. I don't even show up until I know I have questions. Otherwise, I don't do a long presentation. Mine's only like 10, 12 minutes. The rest of it is driven by Q&A, and that's when I wake up. That's when I find it really interesting. So without questions, they're just staring at me and they're asking questions like, where is Vietnam? Mm-hmm. Is it still a country? Yeah. It's like,
wow. Yeah, it does. In my time as a school librarian, I hosted many authors, and I always told people I got really good at it because I did it poorly enough times that I figured out what, it's like you do it. By the end, I was really fantastic at it, but only because I was probably just kind of mediocre there for a while. And then you learn stuff like preparation. So for all you educators watching, if you're going to go, everybody watching, I have all the faith in the world in you. If you're taking your time this evening, you were doing the right thing, I'm sure. But make sure that the kids know the book, right? And they know the author and that they're prepared. And you don't walk in and they ask who the heck you are. That you never want that. Neil Schusterman, who writes YA, and he's, I think probably everybody on here knows who Neil is. He's a giant. He he has shared stories about, walking in and nobody having a clue who he is. So it's certainly happened to Neil, being handed, $3 to go to the cafeteria. Treat your authors better than that, people. That's my 2 cents as the professor. I'm wearing my professor hat and telling you, be better than that. Okay. So, we've talked about school, some kids, inspiration, all that stuff. I want to know, let's go back. For fun, I'd like to know, what's the worst idea you've had for a book? And did you start writing it? What happened with it?
I found a card, my car the other day, and I don't know where it came from, but it's just an index card and it says ectoplasm on it. And I'm like, what the heck? And then it dawned on me, I think sometimes when you're half awake, you think you have this brilliant idea and you're in that half dream state, right before. And I think I just grabbed an index card and it was this YA idea. And I don't know if anybody knows what ectoplasm is, but it was this idea back in the 1800s that you could photograph ghosts, and it turned out it was just this total farce. They had somehow created this weird misty thing and they called it ectoplasm. And I wrote this idea about a YA book about these kids who were doing this, but it turns out it was real ectoplasm. And I have other ideas. I found a file where I wrote this girl who had and I think this is my wound, of freckles, and it turns out there was a constellation of freckles, but it had a hidden message. I mean, some of these ideas are so out there. I'll never write them, but part of me is like, why in the heck would I have thought about ectoplasm and freckles with hidden messages? So I don't know. They're bad ideas.
All right, James Ponte, I'm picking on you because
I can't. I mean, I've had a lot of bad ideas. Unfortunately, I think they've been published. I'm trying to think of a good example of what that might be. But wow, you have truly stumped me on what's the worst.
We can come back to you if you want to continue cooking it for a while.
Yeah, I have to do that.
Thanhha, what about you?
I would say any idea that I think is going to be brilliant before I start writing it. And there have been many.
Is that the kiss of death?
A knee-jerk thing, like I'll hear a neighbor tell a story about a girl who in high school who experienced sexual assault, and I bet I know I'll plunge into that. It's not my thing, right? I can't get enough emotional content out of it, and it's been done very well elsewhere. So I think you know where you are. I know where I can hit, and that's not it. But I always think it's great until you start writing it, and then the whole thing falls apart. The stories that sustain, right? The stories that I'm a slow writer, so when I come up with a story, it has to interest me for a good 5 to 10 years because I'm just sitting with this character. There's usually one main character that carries me all the way through, and it's usually a girl. And she has to be so fascinating that, I would still find her fascinating from, let's say, 35 to 45. Like all those years I'm working on her, she's still fascinating. And that's hard to come up with. So it takes me a really long time to think of a character. And usually I will think about her for decades before I actually start writing her. Again, I don't recommend it. Everything I do not do it. Other people are able to get books out just by blinking. I cannot do it. So I'm working on something now, and I've been thinking about it for 20 years, and it feels very new. It's not quite there yet.
All right, I thought of something.
Okay, let's hear it.
So in 7th grade, 8th grade, I told my teacher I wanted to maybe be a playwright, and out of the blue, he just said, "Well, write a play and we'll produce it." And I'm like, seriously? And he goes, well, he didn't ask permission. He said, yes, we will produce the play. And so I wrote a play, and it was a really turning point experience for me because I sat there all day and watched kids come in and laugh at my jokes and stuff. So it was a very positive experience. But I look back, the play was about Santa's sleigh being overtaken by a Middle Eastern terrorist, and there were guns and Christmas, and there was so many. And I thought this was put on in a public high school. Now, granted, this was the 70s, a middle school, and it's just like everything about it was terrible and wrong. I played Jimmy Carter I at one point had to negotiate a piece with the Ayatollah Khomeini on Santa's sleigh with kids dressed as elves. And that is without a doubt, none of that should ever have happened, but it was a turning point moment. So yeah, and right now, Rosemary is cutting me as a client.
You are a child. You're forgiven.
Years before the end of the conversation, Rose, just know that your question caused that to happen.
James, do you have anything that you want to offer?
I'd say I've been working on, so I do no notes and no outlines or anything, but I have had this idea in my head. It's an awful idea, but I'm not going to give up on it. I'm still in love with it, but it's called The Adventures of Heck Yeah and Big Wow. And it's two best friends, and they live in a very, very calm, nice city where nothing really happens, but their dream is to be superheroes, but their town doesn't need one. So they kind of create problems and try to save the city from their own problems. And I think that's
I like that.
I actually like that.
I don't understand the bad part of that. Keep moving.
Well, I keep thinking of like how stupid situations can be.
Kids love stupid. I like stupid.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in love. I've been in love with it forever. I think I'm just going to keep it in my head and just love it forever. But
that's pretty great. Okay. So I know that each of you, authors usually it's kind of required that you have a website. It's almost kind of a given, and probably on most of your pages. I'm sorry, I didn't check to confirm that all of you have this, but a pretty common feature is like a FAQ, So what I'm wondering is, if that's the case, what I'd love to know is what's something that you are rarely asked that you would like to share with others? What's something that people don't ask you, but you wish people knew about you or about your writing, whichever. Like if you have like an 11th toe or something, we don't need to know about that. Keep that to yourself. But something about yourself that you wish that you could, you rarely get asked and you would like to tell.
Wow, you asked tough questions.
I'm not Barbara Walters.
These are tough.
We're even Oprah, not even close.
I tell everybody everything. I keep no secrets from anyone. So that's a weird question for me, because I don't like, you could ask me anything and I'm like, oh yeah. And people like, I'm an open book, literally.
Got it.
So yeah, this is mostly adults. So no one has ever asked me, James, in college, did you climb up the back of the Hollywood sign and urinate to the second O in the word Hollywood as a way to stake your claim in the film business without actually defacing property? No one has ever asked me that question, but if they did, I would say, yes, in fact, I did. So that no one's asked that.
You were like the dog that goes around and pees around the neighborhood. You're marking
your It's the only time I've ever done that. I mean, it's again, I keep looking to be disappeared off the thing here. Yeah, it's we had no money, and so I went to college in Los Angeles, and people would say, let's do something fun. It's like, let's climb up the Hollywood sign, and it's a stupid thing to do, but we weren't honor students, we were just film students, and so that's where we found ourselves. Yeah, it was fun. It was, you walk up there, it'd take a long time, and you waste a night and not spend any money. So what better fun could you have in college?
I slept under that sign many times.
There you go. Hopefully not when I was.
What was the date?
Well, James, no one asked James, were you, what was it? Were you a security guard at a Rodeo Drive clothing store? Is that the right?
Yeah.
Tell that story. Tell the story of you protecting the Olsen twins as they bought luxury clothes. And in the photograph, by the way, James is the best dressed one. So
I agree.
That's funny. Yeah, well, I've had about 70 to 80 jobs in my life. But yeah, one was being a celebrity security at like a a retail store that a T-shirt was $900, you know, and that's where I got to meet a lot of movie stars, and that's how I was a screenwriter at the time. So a lot of the times there was a gift wrap, you know, you have to do gift wrapping. So I would always volunteer to be the gift wrap. I told them that I was an expert at it, and I did not know how to do it at all. But
so you were already lying for a living,
yeah.
making up stories.
But my backpack was full of my scripts. So like when Nicolas Cage bought something, I would wrap up his shirt with my script in it. And like I did that to almost every celebrity. So
did it ever work? Or did you ever get in trouble for it?
I never got in trouble. So none of them ever told, but I've had like, the way you know how you said I was the best dressed. It's funny because like I would, on my lunch breaks, I would sit and get a like sandwich at 7-Eleven and sit in the parking lot. And I don't know how many times a celebrity walked by, and I'm like, okay, here comes, you know, this happened with Steven Spielberg. I'm like, oh, okay, here comes Steven Spielberg. I'll just stand up, say, hey, I'm a writer. Here's my script. You know, read it if you have time. And Steven Spielberg was walking by right when I looked up, and I said, hey. He's like, sorry, I have no change. I was like, oh. So, yeah.
All right, so
Mcconaughey, I went to I was at Roosevelt Hotel. I used to go to that place all the time, and I met him once. He actually burned. I don't know if he was drinking or just having a blast. But he was slow dancing with a candle once, and he was like grooving on this candle, and he burnt his hand, and I handed him a tissue. That's my Matthew McConaughey story.
I was in line for the taco line. It was at the USC Film School. There was a big party, and it was students and celebrities together. And I was in line for tacos, and George Lucas was behind me, and I was like trying not to hyperventilate. And then he tells his then like 8-year-old daughter, "Oh, here comes Uncle Steven." And then Steven Spielberg comes over. So again, I'm feeling like you in the thing, and I'm just looking ahead and trying not to talk to them. And it comes my turn, and the woman asks me, "How many tacos do you want?" And George Lucas answered. He cut in front of me in line, which I was totally okay with. And then the woman goes, "I was talking to him, not you. I don't know who these people think they are." And I'm like, these people are exactly who you think they are. His name is on the side of the building. He can cut me in line. And it was at that party that I got my first kiss in college. It was just like a friendly kiss. And it was from Ray Bradbury. How about that?
Gosh.
He was a little drunk. It was much cuter. But yes, that's all I'll say. Ray Bradbury
right behind
and George Lucas cut me in the taco line. It was quite a heady day for an 18-year-old from a little town in Florida.
Absolutely. All right. So for the, we're going to be able to take questions. And if you haven't submitted questions yet, this would be a great time to be thinking of something fantastic to ask of our panel. But I'd love to know, before we start doing that, I would love to find out, what's the best way for people to reach out to you and to learn again more about you from then, you know, what they've hopefully got a wonderful glimpse tonight, but how can they connect with you and your work? So tell us, Thanhha, you didn't answer the last question. I let you off the hook, so I'm going to ask that you begin.
Well, my email is on my website.
Okay.
And I have a manager who manages it. And so I usually, I guess they get to know me when I do school visits. And so the manager will handle that. And are you talking about how they can send me questions and I'll answer them?
Oh, no, they're going to do that in the chat. Just like a way to like, where's the best way for them to reach out to you? Not necessarily actually like sending you a message, but just to learn more about you. Are you on social media? Do you have a website that's where you kind of direct people to?
Nope. Nothing. Nothing.
I love it. Keep it real. That's fantastic.
Authenticity.
Nothing wrong with that. Donna, what about you?
Well, I have a website and I am on social media under just my name on Twitter and my Instagram. I'm getting better at it. I have to call in my IT department, which is my kids, to help me. But my website is DB and then my last name, Higuera, HIGUERA.com. And there is a contact thing there I actually have school visit information as well, and a teaching guide for Lupe Wong. And I have to say, I did dance with Tony Curtis in Las Vegas, but I don't think that's anything that anybody, and he did kiss me. I think he was probably almost 90 at the time. It was shortly before he died. My mom was thrilled about it. She's like, you danced with Tony Curtis. But so I didn't think that was something that people would want to know about me. But anyway, yeah, social media, I'm getting better at, but you can reach me through my website.
Perfect. Thank you.
I want to ask,
Byrd, what about you?
I want to ask about Tony Curtis for a second. So when he kissed you, did he smile afterwards? Right?
Oh yeah. Was that from a movie? He grabbed my face and he just laid one on me, and I was just like, what just happened?
Now, famously, he absolutely despised kissing Marilyn Monroe in Some Like It Hot, which means the same man preferred kissing you than kissing Marilyn Monroe.
Oh wow.
That?
Interesting. Yeah. I don't think he had any. He just started dancing with me and grabbed my face. It was super
totally inappropriate, totally awful, but yes.
Yeah. But yeah, my mom was thrilled. So
that's adorable. James Byrd, what about you? I know you're all over the socials, so tell us all your stuff.
Yeah, so I guess if anyone wants to get to know me or my writing, I have 2 or 3 films now on Amazon Prime that I wrote and directed. We Are Boats, Honey Glue, and I think a movie called Eat Spirit Eat, which was my first. I think that's on there now. But other than that, I don't think I have a website. I have a Twitter, but I don't know how to use it. I don't do Twitter. I have Instagram, but you'll learn a lot about my baby, not me, because I post every single day about my baby. So I guess Facebook, if you like pictures of animals, and yeah, I mean, I posted that picture of me as security a long time ago.
Awesome. It's an awesome picture.
I want to dance with
I can say, in that picture, you look like I dreamed that there's someday was a picture of me for a second where I looked as cool as you looked in that picture, and there's not on the planet. And I've had 55 years of pictures. There's nothing comes close.
Well, now tonight I'm going to scrub through the internet looking for a picture of you.
You won't find anything good. I had hair at one point, but that's about it.
Yeah, you need to friend James just to watch his dancing videos with his son. It's the best.
James Byrd. You don't want to see me dance.
James Byrd.
Yeah, he's a dancing machine.
He is.
He's so precious. Yeah, you definitely, if we were going to give out awards tonight, which I'm not, because I love you all equally, but if we were going to give out awards, you would get Cutest Baby. Not you at all. Just Cutest Baby goes to you.
For me, if you want to check in, you can go to jamesponte.com. There is, Facebook, and on that, there's contact, and also there's school visit information and things like that. On Twitter at James Ponte, getting better at Twitter, at Instagram at James Ponte Books. I'm also in need of teenagers to help me make more sense of Instagram than I'm capable of. But I do love that part of this is connecting with educators, because I've learned a lot that way. I've learned a lot about what they want. Also, if you go to my website, there are really amazing curriculum guides for my books. I can say this because they were all written by Dr. Rose Brock, not by me, and she does an amazing job of them. So, yeah, that's where you can keep up with me.
Perfect.
You just realized I'm drinking. It's root beer.
I wasn't going to say anything. I'm not your boss. Okay, so I'm not sure I'm looking to see if we have questions. I'm not supposed to be running the questions, but I don't know that I see any, but they could be there. I'm looking. I can keep asking you questions, and I know we're also getting close to the time that we want to wrap up, but we definitely want to make sure that if anyone has any pressing questions or something I just didn't ask, that we get any of those burning questions answered. So I'm looking. Any questions? Okay.
James, congrats on your New York Times bestseller list. I saw you post that.
Oh, well, thank you. That was lovely and wonderful and surprising. So, yeah, but yeah, now I'm embarrassed. All right. Talk, Rose.
We've got to celebrate those things. Okay, so we do have a question, and it's for James Byrd. Okay, thank you for throwing that up there, James. They want to know, and now this is where I need my readers, because I can see it better on that than on the dark. But what's your inspiration for The Brave?
For The Brave, so my character is half Ojibwe and half white, and I'm half Ojibwe and half white. And I had one parent in my life, not two. And I grew up in Southern California, but my whole family on my Native American side is from Minnesota. And I didn't get to connect. You know, a guy got my mom pregnant and moved her down to LA, and then he didn't want a baby and then left. So I felt like I was, robbed of a childhood where my culture would be really, really strong and a family dynamic. Because in California, I was homeless. We lived in a car. We were evicted nonstop. I lived in about 40 cities in LA, bounced all around town. So I didn't really have a home place. So I wanted to write this where a kid gets a chance, and it's kind of like my chance to go to Minnesota and connect with family and learn about his culture in a way that I didn't get to. So I kind of got to relive my childhood, or the one I wanted, the one I wish I had.
Right.
Wow. That's powerful. It's a great book.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have another one. Do you have any tricks on how to time travel back to your middle grade years when writing? Do you look at photos, a journal, or anything to get you back into that? It's a great question. Thank you, Elaine. So what is that like for y'all? How do you take yourself back to those times?
I kind of made sure I never grew up or never grew out of it. When you're a kid, you think being an adult or, growing up means something, and you think you're going to change. And now that I'm growing up, I'm still thinking the same thing. I still think about dinosaurs just as much as I did when I was a kid. And now that I'm older, I hope I never lose that. Like, I still see mud and want to play in it. And now that I have a kid and seeing how wide-eyed to the world he is and how much he just wants to have fun, I'm really glad that my brain never grew up, and it's weird because it comes with bad things too. Like, I know nothing about taxes, I know nothing about even writing. I know nothing about, I shouldn't admit it, I know nothing about grammar. I know nothing about track changes and docs. I don't know anything about the internet, but I have fun every day. And I have a wife that's really smart.
Yeah, it helps to have smart wives. I certainly have one way smarter than me, and way more encouraging. It's connecting back to that is so tricky, because the problem is, if I connect back to my middle grade years, then I'm also in a time warp of different culture, but I'm writing contemporary books. So the trick is how to connect to middle grader living now, not in a time when a television show was on once, and if you missed it, you missed it. Like if dinner ran late and you missed in my hometown, the power went out in my hometown over the last 10 minutes of the pilot episode of Battlestar Galactica in 1978 or whatever. And in school, it was this nightmare as people are trying, who knows what happened, because there's no way to find out, and you're just asking. Like, one kid lived in an area where they didn't lose power, so he's now like the oracle of Delphi in the cafeteria saying, well, then Starbucks does this and but connecting with, I think the key is what James is talking about for me, is connecting with how you felt. And that I just try to, it's my desk. I look out on a busy street in downtown Orlando, and I see kids all the time, and I try to see what they're going through, and they now know that I'm here, and they'll come by and they'll drop off books they like, and they'll pick up. I have a books like these books I have, but that you guys wrote, and I loan them out, and we have a little library out front, and you just want to stay in touch with kids, because the other problem with going back is, I think, James dealt with some really hard stuff when he was growing up. I dealt with less hard, but some similar kind of stuff. But kids have now layers that they deal with that we can't. There's no corollary to cyberbullying from my childhood. There's no corollary to, like, the digital world and all like this. So it's hard to time travel and keep current.
Anybody else want to add to that?
For me, it's just I think emotions, like the feelings and emotions, they never leave you. You can, I'll be 70 or 80, hopefully, and remember what it felt like to be in middle school, and those emotions, and they're universal. I mean, it's all kids feel them, but we all feel so alone at that age at times too. But the emotions are very real, and you can take yourself back there immediately with a memory or what have you. And all of a sudden you're feeling that internal, your stomach's roiling, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm right back in middle school. So at least for me, I can go back there and be kid Donna and, go back to that time and feel the emotions easily.
Okay. Did we just lose Rose?
Perhaps, or they just cut us off completely.
We lost Rose. Where did she go? She vanishes at 8:11. Rose goes. Okay, well, there's one or two more questions, so maybe she'll hop back in. Oh wait, I see her. She's here. Okay, great.
I don't know what happened. I just did a magic act. I was trying to scroll, and clearly I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Did Thanhha, were you able to answer that last question? I'm so sorry that I disappeared.
It's okay. I would just say that coming here as a refugee was so shocking that, those feelings never leave you. Like, I remember vividly what I ate, what I wore, what I felt, what I smelled when I was from, let's say, 10 to 13. Then, like, the last 10 years living in Westchester, where every day is the same. Like, all my senses are just dulled out, especially after the COVID year. I don't have any new sensations. But back then, it was so shocking. It just kind of stays in your DNA, right? It's in you. So I didn't have to work very hard. It's there. But if someone made me write about, let's say, the last 10 years of my life, I wouldn't be able to do it, because every day has been exactly the same. I get up at the same time. I deal with it's just the same.
Wow. Yeah, I totally get that. I had a similar experience coming to this country when I was 9. And I think you're right. I think there's something about that age for all of us that we just kind of, it lives in a different part of our brain or our DNA, that it just comes back. But, did I have that coffee yesterday, today, tomorrow? Who knows? All that stuff it gets blurry, right? Well, I'm not sure what Erica came on and said, but I'm assuming that she was going to tell us that we are out of time. And is that what you were sharing? Okay, good.
Well, I was just stepping in because we didn't know where you went.
Because I went
leader. You were the guide. We'd be lost without you. But yeah, there are more questions, but we are 13 minutes past the time. And so I want to thank everybody, and I want to respect your times and your evenings. And I'm sure you have things to do, like family and food and whatnot. So I will just say that these, luckily, James and Thanhha and Donna and James Ponte, this is not the only opportunity for you to see them. They are often on panels and speaking, and you can have other opportunities, I am certain, to engage. And I want to thank the four of you for being here and for representing the studio so beautifully. What a lucky agency we are to be able to represent you and your amazing books. And thank you, Rose, for spending your time with us and having your perspective as an educator, in asking these questions and engaging in the conversation it takes the conversation to a whole nother level, one that's really important to us, because the whole point right, of making the books is to connect with the kids. And teachers and librarians, you are the gatekeepers to those children. And so, we're grateful to you all for being here with us tonight. If you want to see more about Samoa Live, there's the website, samoalive.com, and you can see all of our past events. You can also follow us on YouTube, and that way you will know whenever we post a new video. And we are all over social media, unlike some of our brave clients who have avoided it, on Twitter and on Instagram. And I look forward to connecting with all of you there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
It's a pleasure.
I hope to one day hug you all in person.
I know. Won't this be
Absolutely.
amazing? Live and in IRL, in real life. That would be great.
That would be great.
Well, be well, everybody, and thank you so much for being here, and all the attendees. Thank you all so much too.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody. Be well.
And all the teachers and librarians, thank you so much for helping to spread the love of books to kids, which is wonderful, and we truly appreciate it.
We do. Be well, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.